and talk and answer questions as much as possible. So let me accept this recording. And Amy, you can tell me when I do have some slides prepared just to make sure I cover some of the things I want to cover, but I'm totally interruptible, and my slides would only cover at max about half our time. Christy's got a visitor.
Yeah, Jan, we want to also respect your time. So I might just do a little intro for anyone that's new joining our group tonight, and then turn it over to you. And yeah, we'd love to hear your presentation, and then do a little question and answer after, and people can just unmute and ask questions. And like Jan said, just very informal. And then we'll make sure that we close at 8 o'clock to respect everybody's night. I realized that I sent out the Zoom link on the Iowa Science of Reading page, but I failed to mention what group was hosting Jan tonight. So that you know where you are. My name is Amy Manning, and I just facilitate the Iowa Teacher Dyslexia Support Group. We started last January, and it's been a great support for me. And I just wanted to reach out across Iowa to learn more from everyone else that's out there. And so we started a book study and presented with Jan's book, Conquering Dyslexia. And I just recommend it all the time to people that are starting out their journey and learning more about dyslexia. And actually the Science of Reading. It's an excellent book to start that out as well. And then now I'm obsessed with her new fluency book that's out. But as I heard you say, Jan, I didn't realize you had a thicker, more meaty book. I had the thin one. But if you're looking for a fluency book, get the one that's about 140 pages. Yeah. It's amazing. And then I just got in the mail student focused coaching.
Oh my goodness.
I'm so excited. Yeah. So those are my latest obsessions.
You've got to have a whole collection there.
Yeah, it's a sickness, but I think we all have it.
We do. We do.
Yeah.
I can't stop myself.
New and it's passionate work. So I just am thrilled and so excited to have everybody join us tonight. And that Jan, you were so generous with your time to present to us. So I'm going to let Jan take over and introduce herself and tell us all about it.
Okay, very good. So we checked earlier to see that I was actually sharing my screen. Are you seeing it now, Amy? Oh, very good. Okay, so the idea that Amy reached out to ask me to come visit and answer some questions, knowing that at least some of you did a book study on this topic, and I'm so happy to talk about it. This is a very personal topic to me, and it touches me, it touches my heart and makes me happy and proud to know that this book is being read by people and helping people, because that's really why I wrote it. The folks at Benchmark Education, their division of PD Essentials, that's the group I work with there, suggested that I consider writing this book. And I jumped at the chance because of if you've read the book, you know I shared my own experiences, both as a long time, very, very long time now, reading specialist and reading coach. I've also been a professor and a researcher, and I can't quite quit or retire. My son last year said to me, I live in Seattle, so I'm talking to you from Seattle, and I live here in part because my son and daughter-in-law and grandkids live about 2 miles that way, which is east, and my daughter lives about 3 miles that way, west of me. And so I'm very lucky and I get to see them all a lot. But my son, a few months ago, I don't know, we were gathering for something, and he pointed out to me, he said, "Mom, I really haven't seen you fail at very many things in your life, but I have to say you are an epic failure at retirement." And I said, "I know, it's true." And it's simply because like all of you, you know the feeling that this work that we do is not just a profession that we expect to study and learn about and then do the work and get compensated for. There is that, and that's important. But there's a certain amount of this that is just a calling. So was very happy to have the chance to write this book. And in the book, I'm not sure, I'll have to go back and look, but in my webinars, I've tried to make it real clear that I really used the work of Jack Fletcher and his colleagues in a book, a second edition of a book called Learning Disabilities from Identification to Intervention, kind of as my touchstone. There are a lot of areas in dyslexia research right now where there's just no disagreement. There's a vast amount of agreement from the people who do the research, but there are areas where there is disagreement, and we just haven't done enough research yet, or what we understand is has nuances to it. So when that did happen, I just decided, I've known Jack Fletcher for quite a while. We did some work together. I was a professor for a time at Texas A&M University, and Jack worked at the University of Houston. So we did some work together, and I just admire his work so well. And I think it's very important when I talk from a professional standpoint that when I'm talking to other professionals, that the clarity about where I come down on, if there's a side or an opinion. So I want to be clear that Fletcher et al. Is really the folks I look up to when I'm making those decisions. And it was also very important when I wrote this book that not only that I'm accurately representing the most current research, but we wanted, as working with the folks at PD Essentials, we wanted to be sure that we were approaching this topic in a really positive, supportive way. There's so much good news about dyslexia these days. There's there's so much we can do. Always the earlier, the better. But one of the people I was working with at the company wanted to create this graphic and put it early on in the book, this notion of the support success circle. This is the kind of thing that I'm not good at all, graphics or whatever. So I was glad that they did this. But this idea of the support circle around the child, we need the families, we need the teachers and special educators, we need the researchers, we need the tutors, we need the school psychologists, et cetera, all around this child. And so I was really pleased as we created this circle, but we did work for a while to figure out who to put in the middle of this circle. We tried different pictures, and you don't want to, if we stick a boy in there, there is that problem that a lot of people assume dyslexia is an issue with boys, and there were all kinds of questions about who should go in there. So finally I said, let's just put this little cute picture. I think it's adorable myself, but I'm highly prejudiced because this is a picture of my daughter. This is Lizzie, my daughter. I'm guessing that she was probably about 5 years old at this stage, learning to read in the way that 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds do, but didn't know then. It was at least a couple of years before it became clear that Lizzie was struggling. It took a while for us to figure out that what she was struggling with was something we should call dyslexia. But those years of experiencing that as as a parent, certainly affected the way I think about dyslexia and the experiences I've had with dyslexia. So this is from the book. I didn't put this picture in the book, but this is Lizzie in coming over for a visit in my backyard, all grown up now. As I say, she lives here in Seattle too. She works with young children as well. She's a tutor. Not a tutor, that's the wrong word. She is a nanny. And she loves working with birth to preschool. That's her specialty area. And she's been doing that for quite a while. And she's coming over tomorrow for dinner, as a matter of fact. But so she's all grown up, all that schooling that makes life for children or adolescents or adults with dyslexia so challenging. That's all behind her, but dyslexia is still part of her life. So I have that experience from the personal side as well. So if you recall, if you read the book, and some of you did, maybe not all of you, the first 2 chapters are really about defining dyslexia. And because we really wanted this book to be valuable resource for parents, we're talking about what are some of the signs that show up early in children, even before they get to school. So talked about a lot of those things, and started off fairly early talking about some of the more common misconceptions, or I think we have a couple of pages where we talk about the myths of dyslexia. So many things that many of us were taught, and some of the things we're still trying to figure out the truth about, but most of these things were really clear are not true about our students with dyslexia. And we know that because of the vast amount of research that has been conducted. And this is what one of the reasons why I had to use a touchstone for the research that I wanted to share in the book, because there's so much of it. And some of it is very, very technical. The neuroanatomy and neurobiology and pediatric and developmental cognitive neuroscience, and the people who have studied reading through the visual systems, ophthalmology and optometry. That's all on the medical side. And then we have the researchers studying education, how learning happens, the psychology of learning. And so there's just vast amounts of research to sort through and to interpret. But all of that research has really provided some real clarity about the fact that brains develop differently. It's clearly a fact, there really is no dispute, that some brains are born with a biological, neurobiological aspect to the brain that makes processing print more difficult. Now, many of us are comfortable calling that neurobiological condition dyslexia. Others are less comfortable with that for reasons that we can talk about. But there really is we have so much evidence like this brain scan showing 2 different children at age 5. Neither of these children read. But based on what we've learned, particularly in the last 20 years, there's a lot of agreement that this child is not at risk for learning to read. And this child is. Now, here are 2 5-year-olds. Neither of them read, but we can call this child, the one on the right, at risk, because when presented in this study, whatever study was being done, while the children were having their brains scanned, they were asked to engage in some kind of literacy activity. It could have been recognizing some rhyming words, or producing a rhyme, or do these words start with the same sound, or that kind of thing. And while doing that, this student was attempting to process that linguistic information in their right hemisphere. So this is the front of the brain here. So processing in the right hemisphere is not the way that a neurotypical brain processes linguistic information. It should happen. The the typical, most prevalent neurobiology supports the processing of linguistic information in the left hemisphere. So, and if you are not processing linguistic information in the left hemisphere before reading, that's going to make you at risk for learning to read, because your brain not only has to go through the reorganization that all brains do, but it has to go through more reorganization because even the auditory information is not being processed correctly, or the way that facilitates learning to read later. So there are some things we have come to some general conclusions about. These are not all 100% agreed upon, but I do cite a lot of the conclusions from the International Dyslexia Association. But in general, there's agreement that it's not a visual spatial issue, which we thought for at least 100 years. We now know that it's an auditory issue, not a hearing issue, although children who are deaf definitely have similar problems to children who have good auditory processing in terms of their auditory acuity. They can hear, but they're processing information differently. So we know it's not a spatial issue. We do know that this thing we label dyslexia varies in intensity and impact from mild to severe. There's not clear lines like you're mild, you're severe, but we do know that, like many other cognitive disorders, it is a spectrum disorder. It has a genetic component. So these children who are 5 years old, we can see that they were born with brains that are functioning in a different way. There's much, much more research to do in the genetic contribution, or the genetic component, I would say, of dyslexia. There is general agreement. There is no one gene or even a cluster of identifiable genes that we can identify now. But I just heard a talk recently, a couple of weeks ago, from someone who's doing this kind of genetic research in dyslexia. And he said it's quite possible that at some point, far in the future, but we may have some kind of genetic driven intervention specific for dyslexia. So I determine somebody is dyslexic, we do a genetic scan and identify which genes are contributing or causing their dyslexia, and then we can tailor an intervention to their genetic code. So this is far in the future. It's a theory that it could happen someday. We do know that because it has to do with the way that the brain processes linguistic or language information, it can affect speaking, and often it's often referred to as affecting speaking fluency, the processing of spoken language, the storing of spoken language, the accessing of language that's in the brain but not easily accessed. We spend some time in the book, of course, talking about the often devastating emotional consequences of dyslexia, confidence being only one of them. If you read the book, I'm sure you remember the letter written by a student named Noah, 18-year-old high school student. I was so grateful to have the opportunity to share this heart-wrenching piece of writing that he did when he talked about being so embarrassed in English that I never want to go to English again. He talks about the kids laughing at him. They're sharing papers, which was my daughter's nightmare, of swapping papers with her peers, and just being so horrified about that. And at the end, where he says, spelling and reading are my disabilities, and I get no help to get any better at it. The school doesn't help me. And that's why I hate school and all the kids who laugh at me. School just hurts me. And every time I read this page from Noah's journal, it just fires me up. This is why I can't retire. I can't help every Noah out there. None of us can, but we can do much, much better than this. We still don't know, because of all the issues around identifying dyslexia, et cetera. We don't know what the actual percentage of the population is, maybe 15%, but there are researchers who say 3 to 20%. Fletcher et al. Say maybe 1 to 15%. 15%, 10 to 15% seems kind of like in the middle and reasonable to me. If you have the book, you know, on page 120, 121, we discussed Nancy Young's Ladder of Reading with its wonderful message that reading is challenging, but almost all children can climb this ladder and become at least skillful readers, if not proficient readers. It's simply that our children with dyslexia are going to need extra supports to get there. And the key really is in the book. I hope I made this super clear, because the evidence continues to come that early intervention is what makes the difference. But it's not just early identification. That doesn't solve it. Early identification plus early and appropriate intervention does equal the good stuff that has been, Shaywitz calls it, my clicker is not working here. Things just froze for me. Wonder why that happened. There we go. Shaywitz talks about overcoming dyslexia. Fletcher and Nadine Gabb and others actually talk about preventing dyslexia. Of course, we can't prevent it from, you're born with it, so you can't prevent it in that way. But this little clip here that I will cut and paste into the chat later is a link to a 6-minute video that Jack Fletcher did. I don't know when he did it, but I saw it for the first time this weekend. And it's basically him saying the research is clear that we can prevent dyslexia from manifesting if we identify it early and do the appropriate interventions. But it's really important to understand that it's never too late either. I don't know if some of you, all of you, are aware of the Facebook group called The Science of Reading, What I Should Have Learned in College. As of this afternoon, it now has 123,000 members. Amy and I were talking about this, the hunger that people have to connect with the science of reading. But the person who started that group, Donna Hejmenik, not only is she running this huge Facebook group and many branches all over the country, she also takes time to tutor. And on that Facebook page, she has been sharing the fact that she's tutoring a student named Mark, and has allowed her, given her permission to share their journey together. Mark is a dairy farmer who's 61 years old and was just found out that all of his lifelong problems with reading and spelling and writing were because of unidentified dyslexia. And in fact, Donna posted something from Mark this afternoon that he wrote her a happy birthday note. And so they're doing that work together. So 61 years old, and it's never too late. But the truth is, too, we need to be realistic about this, as Jack says in that video clip, that it makes a huge difference to start early. It's never too late to do something about it, and we can make improvements in our students, but the earlier is certainly the better. Chapter 3 was a real challenging one because it's a very challenging topic for many reasons about diagnosing dyslexia. Not everybody agrees about what dyslexia is, so defining or identifying it makes it different. People live in different states or different countries who are reading my book, and there's all different kinds of rules about how we identify dyslexia. So that's part of what makes it really a challenging topic too. Yeah, this is not cooperating. Somehow my computer's tired, I guess. We do know that early screening is really important, but not just, again, to screen and label, but to connect them with the intervention. And that's what I really tried to write about in that chapter. It's do what you need to do to get kids connected with the intervention. If they have to be labeled to qualify for the intervention, let's get that done. But it's all about connecting them with with that intervention. So in the book, I talk about different types of assessment to answer different questions, and what are the different assessments we should use to answer those important questions. But in terms of diagnosing for dyslexia, it's really all about do whatever assessments connect you to the appropriate intervention. And so in my mind, from the research that I've read and my close to 50 years now of being a practitioner, it's doing as deep a dive as we need to about the component pieces. Where are the students' strengths and where are their instructional needs so that we can get started with the intervention. So using Scarborough's rope as a reference for that. Those are the components we need to make an assessment about. And so I agree so much with a great deal of what Tim Odegaard has studied and writes about, a brilliant researcher and professor who himself is dyslexic. So he comes at this from many different levels, but he writes that there is no one single universally adopted assessment that can definitively identify if there's a typo, if a student, I should say student, has dyslexia, but we should rely on a cluster or pattern of concern. So in the book, I created a little scenario about a girl named Emily and showed how at her school, it's the reading specialist who does these skill-based assessments and then uses the pattern, not based on any kind of scientific norms or anything, but just the reading teacher's experience that Emily's phoneme, phonological awareness is a concern, and she determined it to be severe. Again, not by any charts or graphs or numbers, but just according to what this reading specialist knew, that was a severe issue for Emily. Her phonics and decoding determined to be a concern at a moderate level, her sight words a concern at a moderate level, her fluency a concern at the severe level, which is true for a lot of our students with dyslexia. And we use that as an example to say, in the world we'd like to live in, let's just call Emily dyslexic, not have to send her for a neurological exam that costs $3,000 or $4,000, and not to let her require that she go through all this special education testing, but she's got a pattern of behaviors in reading that would suggest dyslexia. The label doesn't matter, it's the intervention that matters. So 2 chapters on reading, divided them into how to teach and what to teach. Of course, books and books and books and books could be written about that. So it was just an overview for sure. But turning to the research, it was really the research on this side of things that I tapped into for my recommendations. And cited these people and others in my webinars. I again try to make it real clear who I'm using for my experts, and it would be these people and many, many more. And certainly I agree with Jennifer Buckingham that the most ethical and prudent action is to provide all children with the most effective reading methods. The issue of having to qualify to get the best services is immoral, ridiculous, wastes time and effort and money. There's a lot of kids who have classic characteristics and symptoms, if you will, of dyslexia who may not qualify for those services, but if they have the instructional need, we should be providing them. So I did my best across several pages to talk about our best and current understanding about this umbrella term that we're calling structured literacy, the components being comprehensive, not just phonics. This is not about just phonics, nor is it just about phoneme awareness. We've got to have all that language piece from the Scarborough's rope, as well as the phoneme awareness and the phonics and the orthographically mapped sight words and all of that. It needs to be a comprehensive program to be a good program. It's just that I think that much of the misunderstandings happen because our kids with dyslexia do need so much phonics and phoneme awareness that it can look to an outsider that that's all we think is important to teach, which it definitely is not. And then teaching this comprehensive instruction systematically, teaching it explicitly with sufficient intensity, and incorporating the multimodality that we know works, the seeing, hearing, saying, writing aspects of instruction. So that's just a quick walkthrough, very quick little walkthrough of the book. And so I'm going to stop sharing here and come back for any questions or conversations or insights that you may have. And Amy's going to help me with that too, the logistics of that all.
I have a burning question.
Okay.
So
Go for it.
With my intervention kids, some of them do really well on the phonemic awareness assessments and the learning and the instruction that we do. And so knowing that dyslexia is like that phonemic phonological processing, how do I reconcile with that when I know, oh, they're doing really well with the phonemic awareness piece, but the decoding is an issue?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Just before I came on to join you tonight, I was typing away on an email of a study group of about, I think there are about 7 of us, who are all researchers and practitioners, one of whom is Marianne Wolf, and we get together on a regular basis. Janine Herron, who's a neuropsychologist, Margie Gillis, who is a researcher and practitioner. I'm just such a lucky person. So we get together and chat about this stuff. And what we were talking about this afternoon on email was that question. There are children who struggle with different aspects of this, but our children that most of us are comfortable calling dyslexic, putting them in a slightly different group, struggle differently. And even within that group, they struggle differently. That was absolutely, I could show you the email I wrote. It's like, we've got to figure this out. And we know a whole lot more than we did even 5 years ago, or certainly 10 or 15 years ago, but we have a lot left to figure out about this. So one of the things that at least in that group of folks that I meet with on a regular basis is struggling with is that we're getting different messages from different researchers. We've got David Kilpatrick saying one thing. We've got Mark Seidenberg saying something a little different. We've got Susan Brady, who has always been my guru around everything phoneme awareness, is kind of in the middle. And one of the messages is that that Mark Seidenberg, I don't know if you are all or some of you aware, he's been doing these, not every week, but he's been doing these coffee chats kind of on Sunday afternoon with his postdoc colleague, Molly Ferry Thorne, about all different topics, and he often has a guest speaker. But just recently, he spent 3 of those sessions, about an hour each, all about phoneme awareness, and came across very strongly saying, saying phonemes are so artificial. They don't even really exist in speech. And he made some strong points about that. But then, of course, they do exist. They don't exist maybe the way a lot of us simple thinkers. I mean, none of us are Mark Seidenberg. So, but the importance, so they don't exist by themselves. They're too ephemeral to teach by themselves. It's vitally important. This is, one of Mark Seidenberg's, vitally important to teach it with the letters. That spending too much time on just the auditory practice and auditory awareness is not going to get us what we need. They have no meaning, they have no purpose outside of its connection to letters, which then sent my study group into a tizzy because, okay, well then what is phoneme awareness separate from phonics? Because when you put the sound with the letter, you're talking about phonics, then there is no phoneme awareness except for the sound component with the letter. So I can tell you that Marianne Wolf doesn't know. Mark Seidenberg does not know enough to tell us how to teach it. We're figuring this out as we speak. So the fact that you've got students who are struggling with this doesn't surprise me at all. I am thinking that Mark is certainly right, that we need to connect this, whatever those sounds are, let's call them phonemes, we need to connect those phonemes with letters as quickly as we possibly can, for sure. But that's going to be really different for some of our children, especially those children that we'll call dyslexic. That's their problem. Other problems emerge later around fluency, but at the get-go, the launching into reading, to figure out what this thing called reading and spelling, decoding and encoding really is, they have to make that connection. So I know that for me, I am backtracking a bit on the advice that I have given in the past to do a lot of, I never recommended that you do phoneme practice in the dark, but I did say that you could, but now I'm really saying we shouldn't. We shouldn't be just talking about sounds. At the minimum, we should be using, fingers or popsicle sticks or Elkonin boxes or chips or something, and then turn all those into letters as soon as we possibly can. I think that's where we are in terms of best practice understanding. But when we have Jack Fletcher and David Kilpatrick and Susan Brady not agreeing with each other, we can all agree that's extremely frustrating because we all want clear answers. But we just have to be patient and then use our brilliant experience as practitioners about what works better for our kids. So Amy, there's your non-answer, but I can tell you it's heartfelt.
Yeah.
I wish I could say, okay, here's what you do, and here's the book, and or here's the website. Again,
So I
Marianne Wolf is
haven't
lost.
watched those webinars yet, but so when Kilpatrick is talking about phonemic proficiency with manipulation, is Mark Seidenberg saying that's not an issue? Like we don't need to get there?
He is. He, and I believe my understanding of Susan Brady is saying the same thing, that there's not sufficient compelling evidence. They do not believe that David has brought sufficient evidence to the table to make that case. Dave is saying he thinks he has, but he's in the process of getting more data. He's doing a study right now that he thinks is going to add. There's never a study. All of you, I don't know where you are in calling yourself a researcher or a user, a consumer of research, but no research study, no one study is ever definitive. We need a compilation. We need a convergence of studies. I mean, some are so strongly compelling that we just sit back and wait for a couple more studies to be done and say, yeah, now we know we can do this. We can do this. But this one, all the stuff around phoneme awareness is definitely controversial enough that we're gonna need to wait a while and ask researchers to continue to do this work before we can more definitively say this is what we should be doing. So yeah, you asked really as far as I'm concerned, a real key question. This is top of mind for me right now. And everybody, I ask people all the time, the people I hold up, Nadine Gabb, I've asked her about this, Susan Smart, Deb Glazer, our little study group. We have invited Mark to come talk to us because we're just like, you've confused us. And we can't be confused because we're the ones who are talking to teachers and giving them guidance for what they should be doing. So I just put in the chat if you want to copy that link, and sometime that's Jack Fletcher talking about the importance of prevention on a YouTube clip. I think it's YouTube, I'm not sure. Any other easy questions for this evening?
Yeah, go for it, everybody.
Okay, I sort of have a question. One of the students that I'm working with, and I work with high school students, and I'm getting buy-in from them by telling them that I'm going back to when they first started learning to read to see what they missed and going from there. And so they've been pretty receptive about doing first grade reading. It's kind of like what we're doing.
Yeah,
And
right.
so it's been actually a lot of fun, and I do one-on-one with this, and I have one student who also has an English language issue. And so if you have anything to speak to on that one, because we're now finding that there's also a special ed component to his learning as well that we didn't know before, because you just kind of figure it's the English language, but it's not. There are things there.
No, I wish I did. Just the way you framed that question makes me assume you understand the issues around all those different components, and the triple whammy for that child. How blessed he is to have you there with. I can tell your patience and understanding and willingness to support, instead of like my daughter got, who had only one of those issues. She was a native English speaker, very proficient in language, and her only disability was dyslexia, but still faced with teachers who wrote, we still talk about this to this day, the frustration of teachers writing on her paper, you need to try harder. Just like, oh my God. Come over to our house some night and watch her, and you tell me, oh, I'm getting chills. My daughter's 41 years old. I should be past this now, but I'm not. Try harder. Yeah, no. This is not about trying harder. And when you think what's going on in that young man, you said this is a male student. What's going on in his brain, this brain trying to rewire itself. If you've ever listened to any of those amazing lectures by Stanislaus Dehaene about how all of our brains, neurotypical brains, need to reconfigure parts of the brain to use them in ways that nature does not support at all. How any of us read is just phenomenal. And so now you're trying to learn to read, and you have a disability where your brain is going to make it even harder, and you're trying to read in a language that's new to you. As you know, okay, lots of hugs.
Well, this particular student tries so hard, and he in the class, we're quite comfortable with the two of us, and so he's willing to take risks. And it's my principal sat in for an evaluation the other day, and she said, I'm really quite impressed by how many risks he's willing to take in, like I do a lot of little word flashcard things with him first. We do a whole series of all different kinds of things, but in those little cards, he's willing to try every word I put in front of him, whether he gets it or not. He's willing to try it, and he is willing to take risks, and he's phenomenal kid.
That's wonderful. So the one thing I would add, and you may be doing this, but I want to be sure, because this really is for some kids a game changer. Make sure that he is writing the words, not just seeing them and saying them, but the encoding, writing it down. It's a missing piece that we used to put over here, or I want to use the term encoding, because spelling, for not anybody on this group, but when we say spelling to teachers and parents, they, oh yeah, the 25 words on Monday and we regurgitate them on Friday. And yeah, we don't do that anymore. Like, well, we never should have done that. But having kids have a whiteboard or a piece of paper or pencil in front of them, so they're seeing the word said or monster or whatever word they're reading. They talk about it, they break it into the pieces, they hear it, they say it, they pay attention to what their mouth is doing, especially for the more dyslexic kids, really getting, oh, what's my tongue doing there? Oh, and then writing it.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then for that child too, then meaning, spending a time, if he's decoding the word mug, if you can anticipate and have a mug available that you could, so mug, this is what we mean by mug.
I actually do a lot of that.
Yeah.
More like dancing around kind of things, and trying to get him to get things, and because I know he doesn't understand them all. And
yeah,
especially words, like sometimes the word link. Does he really know what link means? And how do you,
exactly.
I'm using a lot of, this kind of thing.
The more concrete we can get. And right now I'm channeling another expert that I rely on a lot, Jana Echevarria. If any of you work with English learners, you may recognize her name. She's the lead author in the SIOP model, SIOP, structured, systematic, I don't know. I can never remember what SIOP is, but I'm going to put it just in the chat and you can find it. There are many, many books and websites, and her whole emphasis is making sure that we make things as concrete as possible for the students and connect it to their original language and understandings. That's a great question. I'm just going to be so happy thinking about you working with that young man. Makes me happy.
I have a question.
Hi, Danita. Is that your name there? I assume it is, but then people say, oh no, that's my son, or that's my.
Yeah. No, that's me.
Okay.
So I am a new principal at a school where we are working really hard to bring up all of our scores and all of our students' reading abilities. And so we have kind of a situation where we have a large group of, say, 5th grade readers, our intermediate students, really struggling with fluency. And as we, we've did a lot with duet reading, we've did a lot with repeated readings, we've did a lot with varied passages, but we're really seeing that struggle with those phonics skills. The breakdown being, we're giving quick phonics screeners and we're seeing lots of things that are lots of holes, lots of missing pieces. So as I'm a 1st grade teacher by trade, right? That's where I spent my years. So I know what that instruction looks like as a 1st grade teacher, but just what would be your direction as a school if we are moving a large percentage of our intermediate students missing that phonics instruction? What would be your recommendation in helping us toward not just moving toward the fluency piece, but also really filling that universal instruction?
Anita Archer to the rescue, as she often does. I would, for that age group that you're describing, go right to, or at least take a serious look at the rewards program. That's why she wrote it. It is, and there's a couple of versions of it now. So there's one, and I'm not sure what the versions are, but I know that that one focuses a little bit more specifically on, and some of you may know, so please jump in the chat there too. But one is more specifically around social studies and science words, so that kids have a chance to learn to decode and then read text. So the lesson, it is written as a scripted, explicit instruction. So we can, with some training, an instructional assistant or an aide can really teach that lesson, but best done by a teacher. But it's really teaching kids to read all over again, kind of like Greta was talking about having to do. But there's the program for you. Here are the sounds, and there's a placement, so you can put the students where they would belong in this. But there's some time on every lesson on sounds and words, but not at the first grade level. I love what she does. So if you're working at sounds, they might take the word insect and look at, instead of just in or not, they're reading insect or mistaken or something. So it's multi-syllable stuff, but then she breaks it into CVC syllables, and there you are. But there's sound, practicing the sounds, practicing the syllables, reading multi-syllable words multiple times with, clapping and activity, very respectful of the fact that you're a fifth grader or a sixth grader. And then all the words that they read, they practice the words and then they read them in text, so that it's applied. It's not just like a phonics lesson and a phonics worksheet. They are writing the words, reading the words, and reading them in text to build fluency, with a lot of guidance for how to do that. So that's one of the things I would do. And then I often pair rewards very successfully with, I'm sure, a program that you've all heard about, Read Naturally, or nowadays the company, they kind of rebranded themselves. Read Naturally is the company, but the fluency product is now the one that they're really promoting and encouraging people to use, is an internet-based program called Read Live. So what I want to say about Read Naturally or Read Live is that no program is perfect. And I hear a lot of people say, oh yeah, we used Read Naturally and it didn't work. And all I can say to that is that you can use any program incorrectly. And that's what I see a lot of people doing. A lot of people using Read Naturally incorrectly, or they're doing it just fine, but that's not what the kid needs. Read Naturally is a program to help students who read fairly accurately, but they don't read fluently. It is a targeted fluency intervention. And if you place the right students in it, and they are very precise. That's why it drives me crazy. I used to train for many, many years. I trained people to do Read Naturally. And I would, they're very specific about who, not all kids are a good candidate for Read Naturally. And they have these very strict placement processes that you should be using. And I would do the training, and then I would go watch a teacher teach, and the amazing creativity of teachers. they were doing all kinds of interesting things with it, but not what the program was designed to do. So I've heard lots of people who do some kind of combination, like 2 days a week on Read Naturally and 2 days a week on Read Live, Read Live and then rewards, and then the next week, 3 days on rewards and 2 days on Read Naturally, or 5 weeks on rewards and then 5 weeks on Read Naturally, something like that. For the child you've described, and it sounds like you got a bunch of them, that would be my go-to. And anything else that anybody else wants. And another one is, it's an old SRA program, now McGraw-Hill, called Corrective Reading. although I think they've changed the name of that too, but that was a program designed, I mean, the title Corrective Reading is designed to get kids who learn to read wrong. They were taught to guess or skip over multisyllable words, or and we just need to back them up, just like Greta was talking about, taking these high school kids back to the beginning. But here is a program written for that specifically. And I know there are 3 levels. So there's an A level for kids that really don't read, older kids who don't read at all. The B level is the one I've used most of the time. They read, but they read more like a 2 years below grade level. 5th graders who read like at the 3rd grade level. And C, which I've never used because I don't get to work with kids that read that well, but C is kids who read quite well, but they just need a little oomph or something. So that's another thing to take a look at.
I'd like to add one little piece to another question. So we've
Yeah.
also been using 6-minute solutions.
Oh, I love 6-minute solution.
So one of my concerns though is when I'm watching this, if we have the really inaccurate readers, it seems kind of stressful. It makes me think of
Oh,
like
it's very stressful. No, I love 6-minute solution. In fact, I did a webinar no, it wasn't a webinar. What was it? A presentation at a conference. And I talked about 6-minute solution with that group this morning, many hours ago now that I think about it. It's a terrific, first of all, it's not an intervention. Both kids read for 1 minute each. I mean, that's nice. And it's active engagement. And I'd rather them doing that than sitting in front of a book and pretend to silent read. There's many things, but I did talk about this morning, and I'll just repeat that here. It's not for all kids. Kids should be pretty well established readers, and then they can pair with each other, and then they can practice, and it does no harm, and it's better than silent reading. Silent reading is not bad and shouldn't be banished, but it's not as beneficial for kids as we sometimes think it is. So I would rethink who's doing 6-minute solution, because you're absolutely right, Principal Anita. Your sense about this is absolutely right. We don't want children to practice wrong. That's one of the things I really like about Read Naturally and Read Live, is that they are scaffolded. They should not be making very many mistakes. And if they are, we want to stop. We practice correct reading.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How lucky for your school. I wish I had a principal like you to work with in my early days who knew what they were doing. Instead of just being a good-hearted person who, I don't know, I could go on, but I won't.
We probably have time for one more short question. Anybody has one? I'll ask.
None of the questions are simple enough, right? They're all too complex.
Well, one of our members couldn't make it live tonight, but she had a question, and it's about your QPS.
Oh, yeah.
And she was just wondering, how important is it to use Form A, Form B, and Form C during the year? Or can you use Form A 3 or 4 times to show growth? Or
my intention in creating QPS was that those 3 versions are absolutely equivalent. It's not early in the year you should use A, middle of the year you should use B. The intention was to make them fully equivalent. So you can use any one whenever you need to, and you can do it once a year diagnostically. And if you get the information you need, there's no expectation that you would do it always again later, but the option is there. If you want them for progress monitoring, you could do that. But I often see kids on QPS or any kind of phonics screener like that, their problems are at the early levels, those what we call tasks or skill sets. And then they get pretty good at those and they move to other skill sets. So you can kind of even use the same version as a progress monitor, but that's what that's for. Flip a coin, anything. They should not be easier, a little harder and a little harder. They should be equivalent.
thank you. I guess while we're on that subject, I use it a lot. And is it okay that kids sound out the word and then blend the word? Or do they just need to be blending the word?
Well,
Or
it's
saying the word?
it's whatever, really. It's
Okay.
diagnostic. So it's not, it doesn't have, and it frustrates people. Probably the biggest question I get about QPS is where should my student be in second grade? You know, how many of these should they get by third grade? Or well, we didn't do that because it's a skills sequence that's varies by state. We don't have universal standards that say every child should be. So I used it for many, many years before it was even published, just diagnostically. Okay, so you sound out the words accurately, but you're not saying the words, you're not recognizing the words yet. So that's what I'm going to work on. It's just a note to self rather than right or wrong. It's okay, now I found 5 kids that are all sounding out words but not saying them. I'm going to do an instructional skills group around those kids. Oh, here are some kids that can read the words at 1 second each accurately. And then I've got a whole nother group that is not even sounding out the words correctly. So not saying the sounds consistently. So it's simply diagnostic, not for labeling, but for planning, instruction, and monitoring the effectiveness of your instruction.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I was just going to jump in and just offer a quick little compliment about the spelling on your newest edition of the Quick Phonics spelling, or the Quick Spelling Survey.
Yes,
I
quick
really,
spelling survey. Yeah.
yes, I had the letters in my head and I couldn't come up with the right words, but I really like the way their options of getting 0 points, 1 point, or 2 points. Just giving it recently to a group of third graders that I work with. I'm a reading teacher, interventionist, and struggling writer. What are we going to do with him? That kind of a thing. So part of my diagnosis with him has been to give this group the spelling. And I just love that component of it, because you always have that moment of, okay, well, they wrote the word whip, W-I-P-E. Okay, well then, it's that diagnostic piece that you're talking about,
Yeah,
that observational
exactly.
piece. They're going to get not that example, but they're going to get a point if they have the pattern,
Yeah.
but they can get 2 points if they have it spelled correctly. So that
Yes.
was a poor example that I gave, but I appreciate that component of it very much so.
Well, thank you, Anita. That's been my frustration forever around spelling, is that it's right or wrong. But if the word was cat and one child spells it K-A-T and another child spells it Q-R-Z, those are not in the same universe, and yet they're both wrong. No, one's halfway right and the other one's wrong, way wrong. So yeah, we need to figure out a better way of giving that feedback. So thank you. That's really, I'm glad to hear that addresses a concern of mine.
Yeah. Well, Jan, it's a little over 8 and we want to respect your night, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. And we recorded, so we will share this out, especially for everyone that couldn't make it and want to learn as much as we can from Jan. We're just so happy that you came and learned so much and got some extra nuggets there.
Oh, extra nuggets. That's good.
Yeah.
So I just put in the chat, if any of you are tweeters, is that what, if you're on Twitter, I don't know what it's called. I am on Twitter at Jan Hasbrouck, and my Twitter feed has nothing to do with politicians or movie stars or anything. It's actually quite boring. It's all about reading. I took a long time to feel brave enough to go on Twitter because I thought it was this crazy place where people are yelling at each other and everything. And it might be, but not on my Twitter feed. And I have found it an excellent way to continue conversations with people, get questions answered, hear about new research studies, all kinds of things in just a few short words. So if you haven't been on Twitter and you want to start and you're interested in reading, you could just join and follow me, and then you'll soon be connected to a lot of really brilliant people in reading. But I'd love to see you there, and we can continue the conversation, which I'd love to do.
Well, again, thank you so much. And I know you're probably getting to that point of retirement, but we are lucky to
Not
get
yet.
anything from you that we can. So
Thank you so much. My friend and I say goodbye to you tonight. I have grandkids, I told you, yes, so they've been in my office lately. The confused. It's so puzzle. Phoneme awareness. I don't know. Oh my goodness. All right, I need to have dinner. I think that's what I'm
Okay.
gonna go.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you so much again.
Bye.
Bye.
See you guys later.